Morning, it's 9:37 over here in the UK on the 9th of May, and yesterday Donald Trump announced the withdrawal of the US from the Iran nuclear deal. Just before that, the IDF put Gloan heights on alert over abnormal Iranian movement in Syria. The Israeli army sounded alarms Tuesday night over irregular Iranian movements in Syria, advising Golan residents to ready bomb shelters and putting its air defenses on high alert. In a message to local authorities, the army said its decision was based on abnormal movements from Iranian forces in Syria. The announcement followed multiple warnings by Israeli defense officials of a potential Iranian missile strike on northern Israel, and came just before US President Donald Trump announced that the United States was pulling out of the Iran nuclear deal and imposing new sanctions on the Islamic Republic. So after the announcement was made by Donald Trump, an hour later, Israel launched airstrikes on Syria, killing 9 people. And this was obviously in connection with them saying that they were seeing irregular activity from the Iranian forces in Syria. So the UK-based Syrian Observatory for Human Rights said the strike targeted depots and rocket launchers that likely belong to Iran's elite Revolutionary Guard, killing 9 people. Syrian state news agency reported the sound of explosions near Kishwe and said Syrian air defenses fired at and destroyed 2 Israeli missiles. The Israeli army has opened civilian bomb shelters in the Golan Heights, as just mentioned, in the north of the country, fearing an imminent strike. US military officials told CNN that an attack could be launched from Iranian-backed forces in Syria or Lebanon, or even from inside Iran. The Israeli army released a statement saying its troops are on high alert and defense systems have been deployed, like the Iron Dome and Patriot. The US State Department has today warned American citizens to consider carefully when traveling to Golan Heights until the situation stabilizes. Now, after one of these preemptive strikes by Israel on Iran in Syria, Iran is going to respond. They've already said they're going to. I don't think they're going to do so until after some key things have taken place, like the elections and polls in Lebanon and Iraq, as well as the last day of the 6-week Great Return March, which is the last day is coming up on this Friday. That would be Friday the 11th. So that's why the 10th/11th is one of the watch dates that I'll put up on my channel. And then obviously the following day, Saturday the 12th, would have been the deadline for the Iran nuclear deal. And then on the 14th is Israel's Independence Day. And as I've said, considering all the activity from Israel targeting Iranian bases in Syria, and as of yet we haven't seen a direct response from Iran, could they be waiting until that day or around that time? It's possible. So we'll keep an eye out for it. At the same time, even though Donald Trump has withdrawn the United States from the nuclear deal, the EU countries, the 5 other countries involved in the nuclear deal, are not, and they are trying to kind of save it, I guess. What strikes me with this report is that Donald Trump appears to be isolating America all around. So you can just look at the rhetoric to Mexico and to Canada, the attacking of the London mayor after the terrorist attacks, the conflicts that happened with Australia. Obviously, those things haven't, dealt a huge blow to the relationship, but this potentially could, because one of the things Donald Trump said is that any countries that basically don't fall in line and impose sanctions on Iran will get sanctions imposed on them. So does that mean that, for example, if the United Kingdom, France, Germany, if they all don't, fall in line, will they have sanctions imposed on them? What does that say for the relationship in terms of military cooperation, intelligence sharing, and all that kind of stuff? It just doesn't bode well, and it's only an advantage to places like Russia and China, who are looking for any little gaps to exploit and take advantage of. They're increasing their own economy, increasing their military presence and their significance on the world stage. So a lot of things to look out for. But after all that happened, Netanyahu is trekking off to Russia amid the tensions and the skyrocket over Iran. So not sorry, amid the tensions that have skyrocketed over Iran. So the PM to meet Putin hours after alleged Israeli strike on Iranian base south of Damascus, and as Russia warns of consequences of a nuclear deal pullout. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu left Israel for Moscow on Wednesday morning, saying that his meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin would be focused on ensuring ongoing military cooperation in Syria. His lightning trip to Russia was likely to be overshadowed by growing fears of an Israeli-Iranian confrontation over Syria, hours after Israel reportedly bombed a military site linked to Iranian fighters south of Damascus, and as Israeli authorities ordered bomb shelters opened on the Golan Heights amid fears of an Iranian reprisal. The two countries are also at odds over the US pulling out over the nuclear deal, with a Russian diplomat warning Tuesday night the move could heighten tensions in the Middle East. Leaving first thing this morning to an important meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin, Netanyahu said in a brief statement before boarding his plane. Our meetings are always important, and this one is especially so. Given what is happening now in Syria, it is important to ensure the continued security coordination between the Russian army and the Israeli defense forces. And it just strikes me as weird. You go and attack a base in Syria before speaking to anyone like Russia or well, I think he probably did warn the United States that he was going to do something like this. But now you've kind of done it, and now you're having to, make a lightning trip, as they're saying, quickly to Moscow. For what reason? Pretty clear that Russia is either going to be warning Israel again, or just letting them know that they've crossed the line this time, or in all the other times that they've kind of, preemptively struck Iranian targets in Syria. So the next coming days are going to be really crucial, particularly around the 14th, the 10th and 11th, looking out for increased earthquake activity coming out of Kilauea, and possibly relating to a tsunami event. And then obviously we've got all the references to the possible Red Wedding, and as I've mentioned, all the other events that are happening from now leading up to May the 19th. As I've said, all these dates that we look at, they're not the end of the world dates. They're just dates that we think that something significant is going to take place, in particular, or in close association with some sort of 9/11 style false flag event. And if all of this tension in Syria is escalating because of the alleged chemical attack that took place there, and we're soon going to find out from the OPCW whether they found any traces of chemical attack or not. That could have been the false flag right there, which has led to all of this escalating after. So, you guys, that's the end of the report. You have a good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and God bless.